Hello, this presentation is on the topic, should animal testing be used for medicine, transplants, vaccines, and cosmetics? My name is Gabriela Morales. My classmates are Selayah Duarte, Kamila Mendoza, Sherlyn Aguirre, and
I'm Desiree, and me and Gabriela will be providing information to you today on the the slides for animal testing.
this is for Animal Society 67. Today is December 1st, 2025, and we are group number 3, section 8. So some history on animal testing. Animal testing dates back to before 500 BC in ancient Greece. Back in these days, vivisections were conducted on animals to better understand the body and its functions. Vivisections were experiments conducted on living animals. In these times, Aristotle dissected animals. He established some of the first systematic biological observations on a living organism. Galen also experimented to advance the better understanding of anatomy, physiology, pathology, and pharmacology. He used apes to understand pigs and apes to understand the circulatory, nervous, and respiratory systems. He created like the textbook to medicine. This led to the scientific revolution in the 1600s. This is where William Harvey in 1628 used animals to discover the circulatory system. This set the foundation for cardiology as we know it today. Soon after that, the beginnings of vaccination began. Edward Jenner developed the smallpox vaccine in 1796. This was the very first successful vaccine in human history. It eventually contributed to the eradication of smallpox, which was a huge contribution to humans. And it also provided the research on how to create future vaccines. Jenner used cows to understand cowpox immunity, and this is how he was able to develop it. Then into the 20th century, we had more discoveries using animal testing. We discovered and created insulin for diabetes. We also created antibiotics like penicillin, which saved millions of lives around this time. And soon after, Jonas Salk created the polio vaccine in the early 1950s. And this was huge for the human race as we know it. It reduced polio worldwide by 99%, which prevented millions of people from paralysis. He used live animal testing as well, and he used monkeys and mice to create this vaccine. And as history continued, more discoveries were created using animal testing, organ transplantation, medical imaging, heart and vascular medicine, and cancer treatments were all developed using animal models. And up until today in the 20th century, we still continue to use live testing on animals. Just recently with the COVID-19 epidemic, we were able to create the vaccine experimenting on mice to be able to then move on to human trials, which was proven to be very successful. Next, we're going to look at some ethical aspects of this. Utilitarians support animal use in testing, and this is because of the major benefits for humans. Such benefits are curing diseases or preventing epidemics. So again, speaking back to the COVID-19 epidemic, although we weren't able to prevent it, we were able to control how aggressive the virus was by providing a vaccine to the humans race. And again, all of this was was able to be collected by doing animal testing. However, there is the other side to the ethical aspect of this where many people are not comfortable testing on animals. This is where the animal rights activists began. They began to advocate for animal rights as early as the 1800s, and they would advocate for animal welfare, for humane treatment, and for stricter laws on the people that were violating the animal welfare or were in any way harming the animals in ways they weren't supposed to. And all of this advocacy did do something. It created the biggest reform, which is in demand, which is the 3 R's. And this is something that the 3 R's have now been applied to animal testing to this very day, and they are to be followed. And the 3 R's are replacement, reduction, and refinement. Replacement meaning if there is another substitution that can be tested on that can provide us the same adequate result, it is best to go with that substitute. Reduction is trying to minimize the number of animal subjects on an experiment. And refinement is making sure animal practice has minimal pain and have humane living conditions as they are going into the experiments and through the experiments. Another thing we can touch on is cultural importance. There is a lot of debate over cultures because of the different ways that different cultures view animals. Some cultures treat animals as companions or family members, and this raises moral concern about them being used in experiments. Again, utilitarians, they emphasize human welfare, so they see animal usage as acceptable as long as it is for medical progress. However, there is the debate between the medicine and the cosmetic side of it because there is no advancement other than just aesthetics for cosmetics, as opposed to the medical and the medicine, the vaccine, and the transplants. That is all things that are needed and are essential for the human race. Another thing that has an effect on cultural importance is religious or spiritual traditions. These may influence the use of animals or to certain individuals. One example is in India, cows are not killed or eaten as they symbolize peace. So there is no eaten cattle in India. And compared to the United States, which cows are something that is very common in our daily diet, there is that difference in between cultures. And in Judaism and Islam, pork is forbidden as it's considered impure. So there are these cultural shifts where some people prioritize certain animals based on their religion or their beliefs as opposed to others don't. And because of all these cultural shifts, there has been heavy influence on the way that companies market their products. The not tested on animals label has made a huge influence on consumer identity and on marketing. And all of this affects different brands. So you see them moving towards less animal testing, especially again in the cosmetic sides of it, because again, it's not an essential need. So it helps to just be able to to not test on animals and to be an animal friendly brand. Next, we will go into current events.
Hi everyone, I'm Desiree and I will be providing you information on current events. I'm going to talk about a recent change in the U.S. laws that impacts how new drugs are being tested before they reach the clinical trials. So in December of 2022, Congress passed a FDA Modernization Act 2.0. This law is super important because it ended legal requirements for animal testing before clinical trials. Basically, that doesn't mean that safety testing goes away. It just means companies now have more options for how they test. Instead of only relying on animals, preclinical testing can now be used, and non-clinical alternatives such as veto assays, computer models, and cell-based systems are now coming into place, which is basically like a small lab-grown tissue that mimic human organisms that are now being used. So it kind of takes away from a lot of animals being used while it's still giving us good research. Companies can still use animals if they choose, but it's no longer mandatory for them to. Another major development that is being enforced now, not technically enforced, but is being used, is AI. As we see AI in like schools, AI is more in our everyday lives. It is also in animal testing, and AI models can predict how harmful chemicals are without being used on animals. They can also act as an early screening tool to detect problems before they are used to be tested on. So basically, we can detect a problem before we use it on an animal. And however, this is now being used, and it's leading to faster, cheaper, and more human relevant testing methods. So AI is being tested on and taken over, as well as we have now passed a new Congress, FDA Modernization Act 2.0. On our next slide, I'm going to give you some knowledge on animal testing. A lot of supporters, basically on this side, we do have a lot of supporters for animal testing, and people believe that we can get good knowledge without using humans. Basically saying, I don't mean it harm, but basically saying we can use an animal first before we use a human, putting an animal at risk for death before a human, basically. And personally, I would much rather do that than put a human at risk before an animal. Everybody has opinions, obviously. Animal testing allows researchers to see how drug, vaccine, or medical treatments affect an entire living organism, including the heart, lungs, brain, and immune system. In other words, this helps us predict how the human body might react before those treatments ever reach people. So before we use it on a person, we can see how something can react to that. Another thing is people argue that this process helps prevent toxic or deadly reactions, such as dangerous side effects or even long-term health complications in humans. We see it on animals before we see it on humans. So that is why that is being used. Another major reason supporters give that many animals have extreme high similarities to humans. For example, mice share around 95% of their DNA with humans, and rats, pigs, and primates have organ systems that function very similar to ours. As to why we use these animals, because of this testing, these animals can give researchers reliable insight, telling them how something can work on a body and how the humans might respond to this before we actually use it on ourselves. Like I said, we rather use a mice that we have millions of them. They come in our house. We don't want them in our house. And we rather use this before we use a human. That I feel like a human is just much more valued than a mice. A lot of people don't have connections to mice, but humans, as we do, obviously. Finally, animal testing has also played a huge role in transplant research and organ development. It helps scientists understand how organs grow, how they adapt and how they react to medical procedures. Medical procedures. Overall, this argument claims that animal testing expands the knowledge of scientists and it protects human lives. So going on to the next slide, I am going to be continuing some more knowledge on this. This slide is the discussion of animal research in scientists and medical progress. Basically, first, many life-saving medical developments that we rely on today were made possible because they were tested in animals before being tested in humans, including insulin therapy, antibiotics, organ transplant, chemotherapy, HIV treatments, and much more. Recently, like Gabriela had stated before, the COVID vaccine was also tested on animals before it was used on humans. Without these early studies, many of these treatments wouldn't exist or would not be safe for a human body. Animal models also help research understand several important factors before treatment reaches people. They allow scientists to elevate how the immune system responds, whether the treatment is safe, what is appropriate dose might be, what is the potential for severe reactions. These aren't things that can be ethically tested on humans first, as to why we test them on animals first. Another key point is animal testing offers what is called a whole body perspective. Many alternatives like organoids or computer simulations are useful, but they can't fully replicate an entire functioning body, which supporters of animal testing argue that alternatives still can't stimulate a complete immune system, show interactions across multiple organs, or reflect on a metabolism and digestion. They also struggle to model long-term effects, which is something animals can reveal. So basically saying animals give us more long-term effects, showing them as they go on through life, as to where other treatments that we could use disregarding animals don't. So overall, supporters of animal research believe that until alternatives can model an entire organism, animal testing continues to play an important role in medical safety and innovation. Our next slide is our informed opinion. After getting our research on animal testing, as well as disregarding animal testing, like people against it, our group has formed opinion that we should keep animal testing, and it is good because it's groundbreaking in medicine, vaccines, and transplants. It's done to implement laws so it's not abuse, and it gives us more information on stuff that we can put in the human body to make us better, to cure us from, for example, cancer, different types of things, before we inject it into somebody and that results in death in them. So like I said, we rather use an animal than we use a human. We have much more attachments to humans than we do animals. The next slide are some pictures. For instance, this mice on the left side, we use mice. Like I said, they have a 95% similarity to a human body than other animals. Some dogs are also tested as well. We test a lot of animals for a lot of different things. So yeah, and our next slide will obviously be our references. If you have any questions, these pages and websites are what helped us gain our information, and they're very, very useful. They have some really great knowledge if you guys wanted to look as well. But thank you guys for watching our presentation. Gabriela, did you want to say anything?
Thank you for watching our presentation. Hope you learned some good stuff.